setting. Oh, I think we got it. Okay. Sorry about that. There was something that automatically disabled itself from last time.
Well, you had a computer restart.
I did have a computer restart.
Either that or you're borrowing Mike Pratt's microphone.
Mike Pratt's microphone tends to go too loud.
I thought he killed it also.
He did kill it. He had technical issues recently as well. So yay, we got it working. Sorry about that delay. There was a setting that reset itself on OBS. That happens sometimes. So hello, I'm Cindy.
Michael.
From Part-Time Permies, and we're of course in the middle of spring in Michigan, so another busy week. And I did not get the Herb of the Week done, so I'm going to delay that 1 week, and hopefully we could get Herb of the Week next week. However, I did get a blog up about an event that I went to yesterday, a class I went to, so we'll go over that a little bit. We also got 2 videos up that was actually all recorded before we left for Montreal. So yes, I'm catching up on videos as well. So if you haven't checked them out, we have a video on repurposing a window well to make our Silky mobile. And we have moved the Silkies and Gus into that. And they've been in there 2 weeks now. Yeah.
Yep.
2 weeks now because we moved them in just before going to Montreal. So my dad was house sitting with them in there first. And then this last week. And they're doing pretty well in there. I mean, they're basically, the Silkies will go in there at night with no problem. They don't go on the roost yet, so we're going to have to train them to the roost a little bit. So I've been going in there and putting them on the roost at night. But they've never really slept on a roost. So
a lot of buffering.
Yeah, buffering.
Unless it's.
Yeah, it could be buffering. Could be either end. We might have a little bit of a slower. It says we're kind of in the yellow, so it might be a little bit lag, but should be working okay on this end. You might want to try refreshing, as Finite World said. Thank you, Finite World. Yes, and he linked the video there below. So yeah, it worked well, and it was actually, I mean, we bought a few 2x4s, and everything else we either had on, well, we had on hand.
Wheels, right?
We already had the wheels. I didn't have to buy wheels. I basically took it off an old project. So yeah, so hopefully it won't be too much buffering. That could be on the viewers end or our end.
Everybody else looks to be all right. So yep.
Yeah, so if you just refresh and maybe hopefully it'll catch back up. But yeah, everything else was the window well was taken out of our basement big window because we put a door to the basement. So that construction's been ongoing. And really, it probably took me 5 or 6 hours to do over a couple days. I didn't have a lot of time all at once, but we got it done over a weekend. Oh gosh. Oh no, I'm sorry, Curie, about the buffering that you're having problems with. I think
we've had a lot of rain over the last 3 days. Yeah. I think we have one more day of rain.
Yeah.
Our water table is
high.
Way up again.
Oh my gosh.
Not quite as high as this early spring when it was at record levels, but we had flooding downtown. This is about the 4th time in the last 6 months downtown Kalamazoo is flooded, which and they had historic flooding 3 months ago. Then we got really dry, and now we've just had probably 3+ inches of rain in the last 2 weeks.
And we're having some seepage into our basement again, but we're
very minimal. But the sump pumps are busy.
Yes, the sump pumps are going off all the time, and we have some towels where that likes to build up. And of course, Helix wants to say hi tonight. So yeah, lots of storms. I know there's a lot of storms on the East Coast as well, and some tornadoes out that direction.
Yeah, we've got friends back in New York that had significant damage to their property or neighbor's property.
Yeah.
Lots of trees and tornadoes and just tons of rain too. So
yeah. So we do need the rain for the gardens.
We got really dry for spring. It was getting dusty between the fields being plowed. I drove up to Grand Rapids, which is about almost an hour away, a couple weeks, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And between the construction sites and the general dust and pollen starting and plowing all the fields, there was a noticeable dust in the clouds. It looked like August.
Yeah. It was
So
crazy.
we do need, although some of the fields are getting washed out from what
Yeah.
we're hearing.
So it's hard. It's a balance between trying not to wash away seeds and getting enough moisture for them to germinate.
We have a friend who has a farm, and they've replanted twice, and I'm gonna guess this rain probably means they may have to consider
replanting
a
again.
third time. So but they can't even get in the field right now.
Yeah.
They do specialty beans and peas, and the problem with that is, of course, every time they replant, they have to go locate the product, purchase it, and then of course put it in. So they're kind of hurting. So hopefully they get some good stuff growing.
Oh no, I'm sorry, Carrie. Everybody else, how's the buffering on the other end? Is everybody else doing all right? Then I know Diana said no buffering there.
Yeah, well, if it's a problem, you can catch the replay tomorrow, or when maybe you have a little better weather.
Yeah. The replay shouldn't buffer too bad, I don't think. It can occasionally, but sometimes live buffers more than replays do. But yeah. So we've had trouble because I wanted to get tornado near Austin. Yep. There was tornadoes out east too, but what was I going to say? Oh yeah, we're going to put some transplants in this weekend, but we can't do it with all the soggy soil, so we're going to have to wait, maybe do it at midweek or try to get a few things in at a time. But of course I work full time, so that'll be tough.
So we did get our deer fence
reworked
on our whole garden. We had some damage and some areas taken out for projects, so we did wrap the entire garden in new deer fencing.
Did that today.
And we had rearranged some of our garden plot. So in one way that's good because we don't really want to plant too much and have all the critters going in to pick it out. So, but we'll hopefully plant some next weekend.
Yeah, through this week, next weekend. I didn't get as many seeds started in soil blocks as I wanted, of course, because
we'll just direct seed a whole bunch of stuff probably.
Yeah, so we'll go back to direct seeding, and
or you can make soil blocks and then
could do a second round.
You could make soil blocks and deposit them right into the garden bed.
Yeah, pretty much. Close, because
for their starter.
Yeah, the nice thing about the soil blocks is they have all the amendments in it. So technically, even if you get just barely a seedling going, you could take that and transplant it, and you're basically adding all those amendments to your soil as well.
So with the good weather and the sun, we might just put blocks right into the garden bed.
Yeah, we could do that.
And then add seeds into that.
That's true. That might save a little time.
Yeah, well then you don't have to transplant it, and they're already where you want them.
Yep. So yeah, so we've been busy today. In fact, I was running so late this evening. We have the premium membership for the Abundant Permaculture, and I was hoping to catch the roads live tonight. But apparently, between my running about a half hour late and they only had a half hour live show, I didn't quite catch their show, which probably was not a bad thing because I still had to get all my pictures ready for tonight. So I basically ate my dinner in 5 minutes. So it's been kind of busy. But we did have a second video that went up earlier this week that was on our Rishi expedition with Nabi, where we went to Korea, remember?
Mm-hmm. Undisclosed locations.
Yes, undisclosed locations, because Rishi is highly sought after.
It's a slow grower, and it's one of the most desirable. So, yeah.
It takes 8 months to grow a Rishi. So
and it's fairly abundant in our region.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we
don't need people over harvesting.
It's not our mushroom patch. We were guests to where the location was, so it's always important to keep that private.
Yeah. So. But that was fun, and Finite World's on top of it again with the Hunt for Rishi link right there. That was actually quite a bit of fun on that trip too. We're trying to find multiple spots, but mainly we found
trying to find a new spot on top of the known spot.
Yeah.
But we don't think we're on a big piece of shared land, and we don't think there may be another spot on that property.
There may not be.
We cased it pretty well, and used mapping and aerial and whatever we could. We couldn't find the conditions we believe to be right
ideal.
for it.
So
So
if you're talking about what are the ideal conditions for reishi, so if you know a spot that's like this, it is marshy land, kind of like a little pond. It needs to have water changes in level and some dead trees around it, mainly maples, I think is what we were finding them on. Um, and the water had just receded off those maples. They were wet, but the mushrooms were growing along the root line in the base of those trees.
it's a good, basically swamp to shallow pond.
Exactly. And grassy. There was a lot of grasses in that area too. And Nabi said the only places she's ever found it were these wetlands with a lot of wetland grasses around it with the dead maple trees. So it's kind of that combination. So it was, we only had the one place that Nabi already knew about. Didn't find any others that quite matched that combination. But we did end up finding quite a
We
few.
were a little bit south of premium reishi areas.
Yeah.
Another hour or two north would probably has more likely to have better conditions.
Yeah.
Not that you can't find them all over the place, but
Yeah.
more northern portions of Michigan are
Yeah.
hot for reishi.
For more reishi.
Yeah.
And there's a few different types of reishi too. I don't know all the types specifically.
I saw a 6 by color, but they think there's quite a bit more than that.
More variants by genetics probably.
Yeah, but there's 6 by color.
Yeah. We had ones that were basically a reddish color with a yellow underneath.
And that's among the most common. It's the most sought after, but I think it's just the most common.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. There was a lot of bushwhacking and driving around.
No mosquitoes and no ticks because we just barely caught it before they came out.
Yeah.
And although we were covered in blackberry thorn,
I
had a week and a half. In fact, there was something I
had scratches all the way up.
I had scratches because we were digging into stuff. I had scratches all the way up my arms because I was wearing a 3/4 sleeve shirt.
Yeah. Because there were so many briars, like blackberries, black raspberries, and rose bushes around this area as well. That basically, if you're hiking on solid ground, you're going through thorns. Your other option was to trudge through the shallow waters, and Mike and I did some of that because we had taller boots.
We had our boots, but our boots are only like 10 inches, so you got to watch out for holes. We were right up to the top.
Yeah.
I don't think either one of us fully flooded, but
no,
I think
got a little.
You got a touch wet. I did pretty good, but I got really close. So
yeah.
And I forgot. I had so many cuts and scrapes. We were going somewhere, trying to remember, and I was going to wear a short sleeve shirt, and I'm like, I better put on a shirt because I'm
long sleeve shirt.
Yeah, it was a few days later.
Yeah.
Because I was all scabbed up from the thorns.
Yeah. So that was interesting. You were also like pushing through all the thorns, where I was just pretty much trying to avoid, at least in skin.
I was trained by a Saint Bernard. You just push through.
You
got a thick coat.
Saint Bernards have a thicker coat than we do.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you watch your face and keep going.
Yeah, right. Especially the eyes. But yeah, no, it was an adventure. It was a lot of fun, and the footage is kind of shaky because we were bushwhacking quite a bit, but it was still a lot of fun. But yeah, so there was that. Another thing, well, what's been going on this week?
You had 2 videos you said you put up.
Oh, I mentioned both the
coop
video and the reishi video. So those were the 2 videos that we put up this week. I'll slowly make my way through some of the other footage. I need more days in the week. But next week is a 3-day weekend, so maybe. But we also have to get all the planting done, so kind of balancing videos and planting right now.
Getting close to needing to rearrange our chicken flock and reduce some of the boys and put a few things to freezer camp. So we got that always a half day. By the time you set, although it's easier with the weather. Yeah. You can kind of set up and don't have quite as much stuff to do.
That is a fun autocorrect. You want to learn more about swishing about reishi? Reishi, by the way, I will. I did go through a little bit at the end of that video. If you stick around and watch all the way to the end, I put a little bit. It's mainly a medicinal related mushroom, and
it's earthy and mildly bitter. It's not really bitter, but it's mildly bitter. So it's not culinarily amazing. It's not bad. It's just you wouldn't go make, reishi and throw them on your steak,
Yeah.
and it's kind of woody, so
Yeah.
you
Well,
steep it.
yeah, you steep it. You basically boil it for a while. And then you have base for like 20 plus minutes. You'll boil it. So you can put it in a crock pot, chop it up really pretty small, and put it in a crock pot full of water and just let it go. Um, and let it steep. And then a lot of people use it for kind of general health related things, but it does do things like lower blood pressure. I'm trying to remember everything I put in that video. Oh my gosh. It has some anti-cancer, anti-tumor properties, lowering blood pressure. So I know there's a warning for those who have low blood pressure. It might lower it too far, or those who are on medications for low blood pressure might want to watch it too. Um, and I believe it's also a blood thinner is another thing I put on there. So there are some that could be a good thing, but then again, if you're on medications that do that already or have a bleeding disorder, you got to watch how much reishi intake.
What we talked about, so you can get reishi powders, you can get all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff. You can get a lot of cultivated ones that are grown in wood or wood chips. They're pretty good. That's probably where most of the commercial product comes from.
Yeah.
There is a highly desirable to get the wild ones because some people think they're more potent or more effective. Um, reishi is one of the few very strongly medicinal or recognized medicinal. There really isn't a lot of controversy about it. There might be controversy about how it works. Now, the deal with the wild ones and all the different varieties, you don't necessarily know all the details and strengths on them. But again, you take it as a sort of a preservative thing.
Plant poaching. Oh my gosh. The case of the
Plant
stolen
poaching.
succulents. I hadn't seen that. That'd be
Huh.
interesting to look
Well,
at.
when we were 20 years ago or so, our family was living in Atlanta and there was a huge growth spurt. And so there were neighborhoods or business parks and condos that would get thousands of plants put in as big landscaping projects. And so people would come in after they plant. Some were pretty, some of the higher end places had really nice ornamentals. They would come in on the weekend and they just yank them all out because they were and go whisk them away and resell them. So
Yeah.
but yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Interesting.
yeah.
The succulent poaching incident.
Well, there
State
was
coastline.
another thing they were talking about just last 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago on NPR, also about protecting the the succulents and the cactus and some of the really large cacti in these national parks and state parks in Arizona because they grow slowly and people they don't know how many are being taken. And they will grow naturally, but they were finding holes.
Yeah.
And so some of the large, they're looking at the medium-sized ones, which people may take. The large ones are hard to scoop up, and so they're actually putting some microchips in a very selective few to, and that's only a fraction of the 30,000 or something. I think they said that are out there, but they're the ones that seem like they're high risk to see if they can track people taking them off of state park, state land where they're protected.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are some areas you do have to watch because there are some areas that you really should not be foraging in as far as reishi or anything else because they are state protected lands and stuff. So you got to watch where you're going, but and what the rules are for that area. But so we had those two things. The other thing I had yesterday, you were at the market, but
it's at the market all day.
You were at the market all day.
Kind of rainy, but not terrible.
Yeah, it was raining early. It cleared up a little later. Yeah,
through the period of time. It wasn't a terrible downpour, but it was.
It was a spring shower.
It's rainy.
So, but I had a class, and it's a birthday present for Mike. So last year, for those of you guys who don't know, last year he gave me the full season of foraging with Nobby for my birthday present. So that was awesome. We got all these foraging videos from that, and we're continuing to forage with Nobby every once in a while. And then this year, my birthday present is it's a guild membership for Lillie House, which is a permaculture. They do a lot of permaculture teaching. They have a site with it's really just under an acre of land. Although they did explain it depends on how you measure it. I guess there's two ways of measuring acreage. One is the look from space, straight down on the land, and in that case, it's just under an acre of land, but it's on a hill.
Also, if you look at the
So if you're actually looking at the grade and how much linear land
so if you get
on
hills
that
you build, you actually increase the
have
land.
exactly have more land. So technically it's just over an acre if you're counting the slope and the entire surface area of the slope.
Or flat doesn't help us.
No, it doesn't help us. But it's a complete permaculture site with a nice old 1850s house on it in Kalamazoo. They do a lot of teaching, a lot of classes. They have a good website, which I guess after I'm done, I'll have to link in the description below because I forgot to do that. But if you look up Lillie House, it's Lillie House.
And Mike is
Mike
Jeff.
Hoag.
He's Hoag or Hog. I'm not sure.
It's Hoag.
Yeah, yeah. I want to say it's Hog, but
Okay.
I'm not sure. He is Jeff Lawton, certified permaculture instructor, which there's a number of them out there, but not a whole lot. And for him to be in our backyard, in our serving our neighboring community and accessible is actually somewhat rare. So
Did you know that? So is Justin Rhodes. He went to Australia to study under
yeah,
Jeff Lawton as
actually,
well.
I did know that.
So yeah, so he's really he's certified to teach
And
permaculture.
he's been doing it for quite a while, so he's got
about 10 years. They
studied
said
a lot of material. Yeah, he's
yeah.
well prepared.
And Kim, I think it's
haven't
Willis,
met her,
is
know her,
the
so,
other
yeah.
teacher. I'm not videotaping these because it is their class.
They're fairly expensive, and they do a lot of consulting and high-end specialty work. So yeah, it's definitely it's part of keeping them going. So
yeah, but I did get their permission to kind of talk about different things we learned. You weren't there, so
nope, I have no idea what
I'm trying to share them with them as we go as well. So little nuggets that I pull away from the classes. Now we've done a lot of reading on permaculture and have a lot of ideas of what we want to do. Watch a lot of videos on things. In fact, there's a few things that you can look up. Let me actually pull it up. Online resources that he gave that are free. And one of them is just going to www.jefflawton.com. Now, Jeff is GEOFF. Lawton is
See that I didn't remember.
TON.com, and he has a free series on temperate climate food forests. So if you're in a climate like ours, that would definitely apply. There's another series by Eric, and I'm going to guess on the name pronunciation. It looks Dutch to me. Toensmeier, Toensmeier. He has a YouTube a channel called Perennial Solutions. So if you look that up, I haven't checked that out yet, but those were two recommended free resources for permaculture that you guys can check out if interested.
And Kim, who's the counterpart or does this together, she is a landscape architect, or she does a lot of landscape architecture work, I believe.
Information.
So they partner on different things that they do, so they can provide full resources for planning from the beginning, searching out land, advancing your projects, whatever. So we're going to use them as just continuation, checking that we're on the right track, and are we missing good things, or are we doing something that doesn't make sense? So it's just one more resource, plus they know all the resources to obtain product and solutions and what's working and cultivars in our area. So it's just a deep resource for doing
and a connection really
here,
and getting feedback. So I mean, the whole part of this guild membership is that it's a series of classes once a month from May to November. So that's like what, 6 classes?
So the growing season
basically. And then it also includes walkthrough of the property and their feedback on property and plans and kind of ideas for the property and how to do what you want to do with it. It also includes a set of perennials, which we can make a list of perennials that they happen to be growing on property, and they will give us some of them.
Shoots, cuttings,
various things,
seeds, whatever the appropriate and available items are. So that in itself is probably worth the effort and the money of the class. Is if we had to go first seek these things out and then purchase them or forage and get them, that alone is a huge time and money. So and we have, I don't know if you showed a picture, our ring of perennial
Oh,
beginning of
not
our
yet.
permacultural
Yeah.
forest, which is from a video that's on delay because it's a big
Yeah.
bulk of material. We planted about 8 things, but it was about 5 or 6 different
A few different
plants, and we
varieties.
put them
Yeah.
around a somewhat shady maple tree, and they've all taken off in the
Yeah.
sand right away. And so we'll get to that and take a picture. They're very
Well,
cool perennial edibles.
yeah, what we should really do is maybe after getting some of the stuff in the garden
Yeah,
next weekend, we'll
do a
do
tour.
a video tour of the gardens, including what
End
we're,
of May, June.
yeah, end of May, beginning June. It's
We're
kind of,
running late. We're 2 weeks behind, but the weather's so 2-3 weeks behind, so
tell
it's
you
not a
what,
big deal.
we were even later last year.
Well, in our first year, I had just moved
Yeah.
in, so I
You
didn't
had
get
all
a
the
lot
time
of
in the,
stuff in until middle of June because we were preparing our main garden bed and doing other things, unpacking. So
yeah.
we've been late every year, and it really hasn't been a big deal. So yeah.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of resources. So, I mean, just to touch on some of the things we were going over, it was raining when we got there. So, a lot of the beginning of our class was um, inside, more discussions and ideas about how to make a food forest or forest garden type thing, and just different, design elements that go into it, and all the different things to keep in mind as far as like the different layers, where you can have 5 to like 15 plus layers that would include your upper canopy of taller trees, your lower trees, your shorter ones, your bushes and shrubs, your perennials, your vines if you have vines. So you keep in mind this whole mixture, and you kind of make little guilds of combinations of
We
those
should
different
make
things.
a spoof layering of poison ivy
Oh no.
and ground bees and spider webs and mosquitoes and all the crazy stuff that we have in Michigan in abundance. You could have your
We don't have poisonous. Well, we only have one poisonous snake.
snakes were pretty good on.
But we have snakes. It's just not.
They're just not a problem.
They're not. I don't mind them as long as they're not going for the chickens or the eggs. Yeah. So that's you could do a spoof on that
We
one.
could
That'd be funny.
layer all the
I don't want to do that
pests.
one though.
Although if you layer properly, you're trying to push the pests out. We
No,
had crazy coyotes this week.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
They were really close.
They were busy.
There was a whole bunch of them, and they were yipping and howling for
Yeah.
2 nights. 2 or 3 nights I heard them, but one night was really close.
We're getting distracted, but those nights, I mean, the one thing about going back to our chickens in the new coop, and we're actually now I can't even think of the words now. I'm so tired. We're actually moving the chickens around together. So we have the silky coop and their own poultry net, and the main flock and their chicken tractor and their poultry net, but both have to be connected because we have one energizer. But the Gus and Lucky recently have not been wanting to sleep inside the coops. They've been wanting to stay out and stay out all night. Now, Lucky has, it can get under the coop if he needs shelter, but Gus doesn't have a place like that if he stays out all night. And I'm not going to leave the coop doors open because I don't need any owls or anything flying in and grabbing a bird. So, yeah, Massasauga rattlesnake will just make
They're
you
out
sick.
there, but they're a little hard to find, and you really got to bother them for them to bite you. So
Yeah.
And where we live, because we're dry and sandy, we don't have water. We're not going to have a Mississauga issue, I don't think.
No. And I never did say hi to everybody. I know
Yeah.
there's actually quite a few people in here. So just a quick shout out to Diana, Christy, Valerie, Finite World,
Gary.
yeah, Curie, and who else and Noah's Ark just joined in. So I think those are the more names I've seen popping up. Oh, and Four Horns Farm.
Has been here. Yep.
And have you been here before, Four Horns?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Where are you guys at? You guys should let people know what state you guys are in. I know where probably half of you guys are, but it doesn't hurt to know so we kind of get
You
a
can talk
perspective.
amongst yourself and have your own conversation.
Yeah.
You don't just have to listen to us.
I know that too.
We don't care.
And we'll get distracted and switch back and forth between your conversations and what we have on our plan. So You've only ever seen Mississauga in
Chelsea.
Chelsea, huh? I've never seen. Well, I should say there's one I questioned whether it was, but it would have been a baby and probably would have been only about 4 or 5 inches long. When I was in high school, there was a snake I didn't recognize that was on our driveway, but it wasn't It didn't. The tail
We
didn't
found
rattle or
3
anything.
snakes foraging 2 weeks ago.
One snake twice.
Oh, was it one snake?
Yeah, one snake was twice, and then there was another snake, which was a different one. But they were both, all the snakes we saw were hognose, which are, I've never seen on the east side of the state. I think they're only really on the west side of the state.
Four Horns is in North Florida.
Okay, that's a very hot area. And Christie's in Alabama, another very hot space. And Diana's in Ohio, that's cool.
You guys are way ahead in your growing from You're probably 6 weeks to 2 months ahead of us right now because of our cold start.
Yeah, but the nice thing is we get longer daylight now. So things like onions do better in our climate because of the longer
A lot
daylight.
of things we have we actually have very good growing conditions. We just don't have southern conditions. So there are a few things we don't grow very well, but Michigan, I think we've said this before, has commercially the second most number of agricultural varieties grown, only to California.
Second to California.
302 or something. It's 300 and change are agriculturally grown and sold in our state. Now, some of them may have low volume, but it's highly diverse in edible product.
Yeah. So, and speaking of diversity, actually, I should show you the picture of I'm going to go take us back to Lillie house. So if you want to see the backyard and what a food forest and the transition into a food forest looks like, this is in back of.
They're how many years into this property?
In this property, I know they've been doing permaculture for 10 years, but I think they were in northern Indiana for a while. And this property.
Mike was outside of Chicago.
Yeah.
For a period of time.
And Kim was northern Indiana. But so this property, I'm not sure how many years, about 5, 6 maybe. But this is all, these are all permaculture beds here, really low maintenance, perennials, all edibles pretty much. And then you go back through these paths and you get into those tall trees in the back, and that's all a food forest back there. So this is in back of their house, just barely outside of Kalamazoo. So which is very nice. So a perennial kind of food forest. Some of the topics they were kind of going over with how to set this up. Of course, you have a lot of diversity in there, polycultures. You set it up so that they're perennial, so that they self and otherwise self-seed things. So the annual self-seed and the perennials come back every year automatically. And excuse me. So you have these beds that are extremely low maintenance, and the whole idea is that you don't really have to do anything, and you can basically have, tens and tens of different, probably even hundreds of different varieties of edible food there. But so that is the back area. Some of the other things they talk about are things like sun traps. So in that picture, I showed the tall trees behind, kind of some shrubs and medium-sized things in front, and then in front of those are the lower growing things. And along the sides, actually that direction is facing west. So along the north side, there's some taller trees as well, and just trying to keep that sun focused in that area, and it blocks a lot of the westerly and northerly winds as well. So a lot taken into account with just where things are specifically. I'll get back to some of those gardens, but we did, since we started inside, we started with chatting and with snacking, and he did have this, would be an almond, but it comes from an old type of almond tree that, if you didn't know, almonds and apricots are very much related. And the old trees actually produce the fruit that you can eat and the seeds that you can eat, but people have selected for the nuts, or technically the seeds, or selected for the sweet fruit, so that you kind of eat one or the other in most of those trees now, but they have one of these really old varieties that you can eat the fruit or the so-called nut, either one. So we were snacking on those almond nuts. And they also put together a plate of greens that were a variety of perennial greens. They had sea kale and Turkish rocket and fennel bulb and the frond of it. They had chive flowers. I don't even know if I can name everything on this plate, but there's a lot of different items
They
on
didn't
there.
grow the citrus, did they?
They did
Or,
not grow the
all right.
citrus. They
I
used
see.
that because I don't think they did
Unless it was
anyway.
indoors or.
Yeah. But they almost everything on this plate, other than the citrus, was grown on property, in their perennial beds. So, what's that?
I was just trying to see the picture better.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause I haven't seen these, so.
I should blow this up for a moment. Sorry, show
So I can
Mike,
actually look at
so
what's.
Mike can see this. The yellow, the things that are about to open into yellow flowers on the bottom left of the screen are the Turkish rockets. Those are pretty good. They're a little peppery, kind of like arugula.
Kind of like a rub. Like the rub
Yeah,
plant.
it is a brassica.
Yeah.
Down in the bottom kind of center is the sea kale, which is a perennial kale, which we've
We have
actually
both of these.
we have recently planted both of those in our own food forest, so the very beginnings of beds. And both of those plants get pretty darn big. Bottom right are the chive flowers.
Blossoms, yep.
Yeah. On the right side above the chive blossoms are the fennel, and you can see the fronds all over around the edge of the plate. The one I'm forgetting right now is the one in the very center of the plate. It is another brassica.
It looks like a kale of some sort. I mean, it's.
Yeah, it's another brassica, but I'm not sure exactly what it is. So I forget. I'll have to ask him again. But anyway, so yeah, he made it. That was a very pretty plate. But he suggested actually squeezing lemon, like putting together a little salad and squeezing lemon on it.
Sure,
Which
because
was
that
very good.
replaces vinegar. So in Greece and moving over through Turkey and the Middle East,
Yeah.
sometimes they use vinegar, but more often they use
Use lemon.
lemon. It's lemon and oil, salt and pepper, herbs. Whereas when you move through Europe, moving west through Europe, it's vinegar, fruit vinegars, uh, oil, and herbs, and salt and pepper. So it would make sense if you want to have a nice fresh whey, and it cuts the acid, makes it more palatable and easier to eat.
And all of these plants are things that are grown, and he recently, like, it's May. How many people are harvesting things in May in Michigan? Most people are just trying to get things in the ground, but since these are perennials, they're already growing up.
So when you have like perennial kales, they shoot with everything else because they like the cool weather. So instead of trying to establish kale and have everybody bringing kale to market at the same time, you're eating it practically as the snow is thawing. You're getting your first bits of it because it's ready to go.
And if you'd like to see what this sea kale looks like on the established sea kale, ours are very small right now because we just planted it.
Transplanted.
But it is very large. So
well, the head on it, we got the wintering head was over an inch stalk.
So I'm going to switch it to the big screen here as well so Mike can see the picture up close. So sorry, Mike hasn't seen these. If I could, there's a little delay though, so let me wait until that catches up with it. But that is the sea kale that we're eating. We're eating the smaller leaves with the bigger leaves. What they primarily do, because they start getting tough, you can cook them, but you can also chop and drop them and use them for mulch. So they really, in these beds, they just chop and drop. They've double dug it to set up the beds first time around, but they have not done any bit of tilling since. And really, some of these perennials, once they get past the eating point, they just chop it down, drop it on there, and mulch with it. And that also fertilizes as it breaks down. And then the perennial sends up new leaves that, as their new leaves are tender, you can eat those.
Plus, as people with chickens, that gives you automatic
chicken
forage, so you can chop and drop some, but you can also transfer it over to the chickens and cut feed and improve flavor with some really nice high vitamin mineral items into the chickens. Especially when it's when they've been eating grain all winter and finally get some
Greens
stuff
in them.
early season.
Yeah. So that is the sea kale, which is native to primarily native to Europe along the coastline, all up and down Europe. Ireland, I think, has a lot in England.
Cooler areas. Yep.
Cooler areas, but even into France a little bit as well. Show you one of the let me see here. One of the beds up close. Oops, I gotta fix this picture first. Before I switch it over. Sorry about that. I thought I did all these pictures very quickly. No, it was just too expanded. I had to fit it to the screen. But this is one of their permaculture beds, perennial beds that they have in that back area that I just showed the picture of. And if you notice, you can actually see so many different edible plants here. I'm going to give it a second and blow it up for Mike here. You have, of course, some of the wild forest stuff. So if you look in front, some of that, those long, skinny ones with the almost like a star shape leaves coming off of it, those would be cleavers. So those are wild that they just let grow because they're edible. Just out of the picture on the left, you can kind of see some of the flowers growing. That's a quince bush. Straight ahead is actually, I have another picture where I circled it. Right there is the giant rhubarb, which is like over 3 feet tall. So it's a little hard to get perspective on here, but these plants are growing huge in these guilds that have so many different species.
Most people would think this is just a jungle-fied backyard, and it's a rethinking of agriculture. And we came across this accidentally over 10 years ago, traveling in Trinidad, and saw it in a tropical environment where a family was just growing in non-rows and columns, intermixing. Some items were grown where they made sense, where they grew best, but then other things were all basically how you walk out of your door and with light and slope, and we're growing in this pattern. And we were kind of amazed by that. And 10 years plus, we kind of realized that sometimes it makes more sense. When you're doing big agriculture, you need to harvest, you need rows and columns. But when you're doing small agriculture, you can really limit that.
And you could go out and pick basically around. Now this bed is actually a little bit of a keyhole. There's a path coming up the middle from the other side. We're actually looking south here, so that path up the middle is on the south side. So all of their beds are accessible from 2 angles, so that you can reach all the way to the middle, which is nice as well. So keeping that in mind, you want to be able to reach the things without walking on them. They never set foot in any area that doesn't have grass. Or sometimes they have stepping stones, but not mainly, it's grass or mulch. So for their paths, so that's they have really, I mean, lush land there. Oops, sorry, let me go back to, I didn't mean to switch it there, but let me go back to us. I'm trying to think if I had any other pictures on here. I do have some other pictures. If you watch my Instagram channel, I did post a picture of a pawpaw flower because they are growing pawpaw trees in this area as well, and they are now in flower. So that's kind of an interesting, really dark red maroon type flower. So other things that we're talking about, just little nuggets that I'll just kind of throw out there is we were talking a little bit about some different tools. There is a book that I'm kind of wanting to look into that one of the other classmates had mentioned, called Tending the Wild. And the idea of kind of doing forest gardens was probably originally what people did, even prior to hunter-gathering. It was more kind of manipulating the immediate environment, forest environment, so that, and helping those plants grow that are edible and seed that are edible, so that there's more food around, which was basically a forest garden, which is what a lot of permaculture concepts of what they're trying to do is really trying to create an area that you don't have to do much to. And by creating an area like that, you only really need it once you get it going, you only need to do, work on it maybe a couple hours a week, to go in and harvest things.
So you pull out the stuff you don't like the poison
Yeah.
ivy, and if things are getting overgrown and getting out of control and too much of something, you cut that
Chop and
down
drop
just
it
because you don't want as much and let something else
and grow
start
something else in there.
take
Yeah.
over or
Yeah.
add in a new plant. But yeah, you're really thinning
Yeah.
back where you're concerned about overgrowth of variety and creating variety.
Yeah, huge diversity in these different islands of garden, basically. Even in the front, it was kind of the same concept, but a little bit more annuals. It was their annual vegetable garden in front of the house, but even the annual vegetable garden has a lot of perennials in it, like that sea kale was in that garden, uh, as partially because they can use it as chop and drop to keep the mulch up on the other bed, all these beds. It's right there for them. You don't have to go walking and get a wheelbarrow to take to your compost pile and bring compost in. This is composting right on the beds. Um, they had some apple trees and plum trees and things like that in the annual garden area surrounding that. Um, and one thing they were suggesting, because in Michigan it's really hard to grow fruit trees without spraying because we do have a lot of insects and disease in the area.
A lot of humidity, yeah, a lot of fluctuation, a lot
Yeah,
of insects, and we have a lot of commercial spraying and agriculture
yeah.
that pushes
The insects
to the
to other
non-spray
areas.
products. So yeah,
So it's really hard to grow fruit tree uh, where it just and get edible fruit in this area. So if you're doing it on a large scale, it's very hard to do without spraying at this point. Now, Stefan on the Great American Farm Tour up in Ontario wasn't spraying, and he's in a very similar environment to where we are. So I'm not saying it's not possible, it's just difficult.
well, he was doing some minimal spraying of
Y-
clays
Um,
or detergents, soap,
yeah,
um, rarely, and then using trapping. He's also a biologist that spent most of his life looking at some of these things, so
yeah,
he's very attuned and right on top of it. If you don't know, that's prone for amateurs. I know with fruit, if you don't know exactly what it is and when to hit it,
yeah.
and how in minimal ways, you can lose the whole crop. It's so it is very difficult. You have to be very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah,
if you're doing it for individual, eating, they were actually suggesting bagging the fruit, which I have seen before and I've tried before, but I've tried it with paper bags. And the hard thing is it gets heavy on the fruit. So if you have to wait long enough for the fruit to get a strong enough stem to be able to, get a paper bag on it, um, it's just a little bit difficult to do. Because sometimes they already have damage to them and stuff like that. So, but what they're doing is they actually bought wedding favor bags. You know those mesh wedding favor bags with the drawstrings on the top, and they would buy a bunch of those, and they would pick the best fruit, and of course make sure there's no other fruit around there because you want all the concentration of sugars to go to that fruit, and it's a lot healthier if there's not as much nearby. But you put the bag, even on these little apples that are just starting about this big, put it on one
well,
apple.
1870s it showed up.
Hi, 1870s. Um, but yeah, you put these wedding favor bags on this one apple. You don't even tie it; just pull the string so it tightens around it. You could do that for plums. Um, we're doing that, pears. They did mention, and I'm gonna have to ask again. There's one type of, I think it's an Asian pear that actually does very well in Michigan without spray.
The
So
Asian pear, yeah, has very minimal um, pests.
yeah, so
Navi's mentioned
there's
that too.
one specific
Yeah,
species of it, so that might be a good one for us here.
yeah, Bonamigo has cuttings
Yeah,
that we could. Yeah.
there's, I think, one type of cherry that they prefer as well for the same reasons.
There's a number of fruit growers, but for those of you that have heard of oikos, and some other
There's some others.
and some others. They're located right in our area, so
Yeah.
they are working on specialty heirloom cold hardies and especially disease
Yeah.
resistance. So we have a lot of options to get stuff. Although a lot of those guys that sell it, my understanding is they actually sell the stuff pretty small.
Yeah.
So you gotta push them to get them to grow, and it takes a long time to grow them out.
Yeah, he
But
does.
we have a lot of specialty stuff that for people
Yeah.
looking to do no spray.
Yeah. That
Um,
are better for this region,
and
basically.
they're very cold hardy because we're
Cold
pushing our
hardy,
cold zones a little bit.
disease hardy for this region. So they are one of them. That is one thing that they were mentioning that they were going to put together in an email is a list of places to find certain types
We
of
met some
plants.
guys on a big farm down last year that are just in northern Indiana that have a um, few hundred varieties of apples and pears, a lot of heirlooms. I have a bottle of pear brandy
Yes, I do.
that I've had for years because I don't even know when I'm going to open it.
Yeah.
Made in Michigan. They claimed at that time they were the only one or two producers in Michigan that do the pear in a bottle, and then of course you make brandy with other pears, and you put the brandy over the top of the pear and preserve it. It still looks pretty good. It's sitting there, really hasn't fallen apart. So I have one, but the problem is when it's such a specialty item, when do you
When
ever
you use it?
do you ever open it? I
Yeah.
guess you find a time, but
Yeah.
I've had
Yeah.
it for 15 years. And of course,
Yeah.
brandy and things like that don't get any better, and they don't get any worse. They just sit in the bottle.
Yeah. And that 18 episode at this, you just joined in. I'm talking about a class, permaculture class that I was taking at Lillie House in Kalamazoo, and it's you're off the screen.
Oh.
And it's a run by two people. One who was trained by Jeff Lawton, which is awesome, and basically, I don't think they spray neem oil on their fruit trees at all.
Neem oil is slightly toxic. It is toxic to good and bad pests.
Yeah, that's a problem.
It will kill a lot of things. So it can be used when you got a real selectively when you have a real bad outbreak, but I believe it will bother the ladybugs. It'll bother possibly the other flying and pollinators.
Yeah.
So you have to watch the concentration. And in general, I think a lot of people are trying to stay away, but from it because it has poor effects all around. So.
I mean, it's
but
a
it
give
is
and take.
It's a tool, and
we had that same conversation about DE and when do you use DE, diatomaceous earth, to get rid of certain pests, because again, any insect that crawls through that is going to die. It cuts up the exoskeleton and dehydrates them. So that would apply to both the pests you're trying to get rid of as well as the beneficials that end up crawling through it. So it's kind of hard balance there. So it didn't seem like they were doing anything, putting anything on their trees. What they were doing is because they're just
clay and very light detergents or soap for dinner are the most inert items because they basically either resist the animals from landing there or laying eggs or eating because they don't like the conditions. But then of course, you have to keep reapplying every time there is rain.
But they weren't really doing anything over there. They were basically figuring out how much fruit they wanted because they're raising it for themselves and bagging it in wedding favor bags, which are really lightweight mesh bags with drawstrings, and you could get different sizes for different fruit. And you could, because it's so lightweight, you could put it on tiny fruit without causing it to fall off. So that's basically what they've been doing. Of course,
there's eating fruit, but there's also baking fruit and cider fruit and fermenting fruit for either cider, fermented ciders, or for vinegar. So you only need a portion of your fruit as fresh, high quality, and you could still make, unless it's terrible, make quite a yield with it.
Yeah, Brie, I didn't even realize it's almost 10.
Yeah. We had really good flowering on our apple trees this year. Last year we had a really late frost, a hard freeze that hurt a lot of the fruit. We lost a lot of fruit, not us, but we have fruit farms in our area that lost a lot of the fruit. This year we were so cold, but we haven't had a late frost, and so we got really strong flowering with this rain. So we'll see what the pollination is. We have some apple trees that we're not really excited about.
They're not very healthy.
They haven't yielded anything to speak of. They're
but we haven't done anything.
they're shaded, they're older, they're probably commercial cultivars.
Yeah.
We trimmed them back heavily one year, which stunted them, but it kind of got some shape and got some problems fixed. We did nothing last year, and this year I just cut the suckers off. And I think we're getting. It'll be
We might be
interesting to
getting
see
some
what
fruit.
happens this year.
So I kind of want to get some of those wedding favor bags and see if we can
Yeah,
bag some of the apples just to see if we can protect them. And it really needs to be done very
pretty soon.
soon
Yeah,
because those flowers are falling off, which means the fruit is starting. And as soon as the fruit starts, you got to get the bags on if you want to save them from the insects, because as soon as there's damage, it's too late. So that was one of the things we was doing outside. Um, Another interesting thing that they had a bed set up in the in the annual garden out front, two big beds that were all dandelion, all going to seed at that, all dandelion on purpose. There were some other things mixed in. There were some daffodils mixed in there. They don't eat daffodils, but just for early pollinator plants. But what they said that they do is they take a tool, which is basically a little sickle, just a handheld one, or he was calling it a comma, that is really sharp. And you basically take the grasses and the dandelions and chop and drop them. He does that to the entire bed and then plants corn directly in it. And he said that um, with by having things like the dandelions there with the long tap roots, taking advantage of it, not digging them out, just chop and drop them. Those long tap roots pull up nutrients from deeper in that help the corn grow. So he's basically, it's kind of his cover crop before doing the corn. So he hasn't put his corn in yet. He was basically just starting to chop some of the dandelions and just wanted to show us what I was doing. Yeah, he's back, Helix. So that I found was an interesting way to grow corn, and I'll see how what he does to that bed as the season goes. Um, but another little tidbit I was taking away is just their thought process on how to approach weeds. Um, they don't try. You stop playing with Helix's tail. They don't, they don't try to fight weeds. They don't try to pull weeds or anything like that. Because he says that's the losing battle. You pull weeds, you're creating the environment for the weed to move right back in. The ideal environment for that same weed is to move in to disturb soil. So what they do is he was basically saying you got to fight weeds with your brain instead of with just pulling them, with fighting them. So you got to outthink the weed, is what he said. And basically, if you think of how things progress, in natural landscapes, disturb soil, you get your pioneer species. Most of the pioneer species are what we consider weeds, things that move into all that disturbed soil. And he said, well, the next step of the progression would be um, he was basically saying dandelions are actually second step. So the taproot plants, a lot of the nitrogen fixers are in that second step. So you go from like these grasses to savannas and things to bigger plants, bushes to forests and things. It's all a succession of plants moving in. No one plant will stay there forever if you let that succession happen. So he was talking about trying to speed up the succession rather than fight the ones that are moving in, trying to help move the next stage plants in so they outcompete those plants you didn't want there. And they were talking about some of the ground ivies that tend to take over and things. And he actually showed us a bed in the forest area that was completely covered with this ground ivy. And you can still see little bits of it in that bed, but basically they outshaded it with bigger plants that are edible and outcompeted it. So it was kind of interesting on that as well, because you hear so much about people trying to fight weeds to grow their food and fight grasses and all of that. He didn't fight grasses. He let grasses grow if there's enough room for them to grow, and he used them as mulch. So it was,
We've
why
done
fight
that
it?
where we had dirty straw
Hmm.
that ended up having a lot of barley in it.
You just chop and drop it.
And we just were trying to clear it away so that it wasn't getting in the way and competing too much with our seedlings.
Yeah.
And we chopped and dropped it, which was a perfect nitrogen fixer and actually helped build our first year garden bed
Yeah.
quite a bit with additional straw buildup. We tried to get it before it seeded, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, that works pretty well just to move it out of the way, or if it's just way outgrowing everything else to get it knocked down so the other stuff has a chance. We're doing that in our front yard right now. Front yard is somewhat shaded. Put in a whole bunch of pasture grasses. They're taking off slow. And then I just cut the grass for the first time today. I cut the front area, which has some more traditional grasses, and it's not shaded.
Yeah.
I took that down, but we're letting the center areas with the pasture grasses try and establish and grow up. I can only cut as high as 4 inches. My mower won't do.
Any
I don't
higher
have a
than
farm tractor that'll do 6 inches or something. So I wish I could go a little higher, but we're going to let that grow up quite a bit and cut it less often, we think. We also were told that, the problem, people say you can't grow grass in highly shaded areas. And somebody said, well, that's not true. The problem is everybody cuts it too short. You cut it short, you take away
the ability
the ability
to
for
photosynthesize.
photosynthesis. It needs additional green areas to grab more light and more nutrients to continue to exist. So you actually want to cut it less frequently and cut it higher, and you have a better chance of a shady area. And then our back area, of course, we cut once a year, and so that's just starting. We added a bunch of new seeds and things that we've talked about, and we're growing it among our wild stuff. And so we're just waiting to see how that develops. The chickens do go through there, so they disturb it some.
Yeah.
They eat it down, but we're trying to keep them out of that area for a few weeks,
Yeah.
as much as possible to let things take off.
And then we'll put them through and pasture them on that, and hopefully cut their feed a little bit that way. And that was another change. If you follow on Instagram and on our Facebook page, that we did make a switch to start soaking the feed of the chickens to reduce the amount. And I have noticed that they're eating a little bit less
Justin Rose was
amount.
going back to some of his earlier material and just kind of refocusing on things he hasn't talked about in a long time.
Yeah.
And his claim is you'll get at least a 25% reduction
Oh,
in
it's
feed.
15%.
They said 25.
Well, somewhere in there, but actually it does
You
seem
will get it. He
significant.
claims it is a noticeable,
Yeah.
recordable
It is.
reduction in feed by soaking it, mostly because you get more bioavailable nutrients. It's not like you're making compost tea. I think you're just expanding it, like when we soak beans, which means more of it
More digestible.
gets digested before it comes out the other end. So you're not wasting the feed that you bought.
Yeah, and I have noticed that because I actually wasn't sure how much they would eat at first of the soaked feed, and was probably giving them too much, because the next day they still had some left, so they don't need as
When you
much
think
of
of it, the
that.
birds eat an awful lot of hydrated grains.
Yeah.
They will eat dry grains when they're available, but we feed all dry grains because that's the way we keep them from rotting. So the
Yeah.
idea of actually giving them a lot of hydrated grains makes sense.
Little sense, yeah. So that was another change this week that's unrelated to my class, but I'm also starting to try to keep a list of plants that we might want to put in our food forest, because one of the things by the end of the class is we'll be able to get some perennials from them, or throughout the class, that we could plant in our own food forest. So it's a Chinese apricot, and I want to say I couldn't Chinese something apricot, and I'll have to ask him, because it sounded to me when he said it in class like Chinese Mormon apricot, but that doesn't make sense. The pear is, I think he said Choguro Asian pear. I'll have to look that one up. Green garlic is, he has alliums everywhere, and alliums help keep the pests away too. So that is another thing. He has alliums scattered throughout. He lets them go to seed. He lets them, he'll split the bulbs and replant all over the place. So he has green garlic. He has your standard garlic. He has Egyptian walking onions, to help make sure that they keep coming back. So I do want to try green garlic, and I do want to try Egyptian walking onions. I want to try quince. We gotta have
I
quince.
love quince. Quince is an amazing fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah, baked quince and quince paste and
And it's supposed to do
jams.
really well in Michigan.
It
So
does. I mean, it grows throughout the world. It's really the earliest lead into apples and a lot of cultivated domesticated fruits. But quince is, of course, it tastes terrible raw. You really can't eat it raw, but it's a
quince
wonderful
paste is really
it's a
nice.
wonderful item to have. The bushes, you got to watch out. The thorns are vicious. But and they flower. A lot of people get them just because they flower ornamentally.
Yeah,
they're really
pretty.
nice, usually a pink or pink and white flower.
Yeah, which was just outside my picture on the other picture. I might be able to post some more to Instagram of the other pictures I took. And I'll try to take more pictures.
But they were saying watch out on the quince because they are very susceptible to blight and moving blight into your other fruit trees. So make sure you get one of the blight resistant quinces, varieties. Not an ornamental.
Yeah. It'd be a good hedgerow plant with all the thorns.
Well, remember our neighbor in New York had crazy huge ones. In fact, she never did anything with the fruit, and I asked to take them.
Yeah.
And she's like, take them all.
She didn't know what to do with the fruit.
Yeah.
So
quince. So what quince is bitter and tannic, drying of the mouth when it's raw, although it sweetens up a little bit as it matures. So typically you roast it like a baked apple. Quince has a tremendous amount of seeds. It has a bigger core than an apple. Interestingly, there is a lot of pectin in quince, more so than almost anything else. So some of your fruit pectins come from quince, from using the pip and the skin. And so, or you can even boil it down and extract that water and reduce it and make natural pectin. Pectin usually comes from apples, citrus, or quince, and you could add it to your other jams and jellies to strengthen it. But primarily what you do with quince, other than like a baked fruit or like a tarte tatin, you cook it down into like almost like an applesauce or a puree. Make sure you get all the seeds and stuff removed. And then you just you add a lot of sugar to it. So you're thinking applesauce, and it starts to caramelize as it cooks and turn a little pinkish red. And then you simmer it and simmer it and simmer it until you get it down as low as you can without burning it, which is hard. It's like maple. You can burn it real easily. Then you usually get it in a pan and you put it in an oven, low oven, and you dehydrate, or a dehydrator, and you bring it all the way down dehydrated to the point that it becomes either a spreadable jam or an actual paste, hard sliceable loaf.
Like I was going
to
say like Jello.
It's a block. Like a block
that's harder than Jello.
Yeah, and it's got a little bit of texture from the fiber and pulp. In Spain, they call it membrillo. If you've ever had membrillo, it's served frequently with cheese or as a fruit spread, and it's used in desserts. And you can buy boxes or containers of it. But look for membrillo. Some of the other Spanish countries use it, and to me is one of the most wonderful natural items. Of course, sugar's added, but really, really fun stuff.
Yep, and it goes really well with cheese, with a lot of cheeses, quince paste and cheese, that is. But
yep. Yeah, the loaf is dehydrated. So when you dehydrate the paste in a pan, it forms. Think of it, it will set into a loaf, and then it can be sliced into thin like cubes or slices.
Really thick jelly.
Almost. Yeah, it's
like a really dense, like.
And it has some spiciness. Think about applesauce, but more nuanced, more caramely, almost some kind of cinnamony notes.
Yeah.
Earthy notes.
It's really good.
But yeah, look through your international sections, maybe at a specialty store. It's not always that expensive. You go to the right store.
They might have it.
I found it a lot in New York, actually, in some of the Spanish grocery stores, because it's a desirable item. Again, I think it comes from the traditions of Spain, not so much Latin American countries. But maybe there's some growing there. I think it grows through much of the world. I think even hot and cold areas.
Yeah.
But look for it, or if you go to a nice cheese place, almost always they'll have date cakes and almond cakes and different things to pair with it. I'll guarantee you, if it's a serious cheese shop, they've got some quince either in a spreadable or a block.
Yeah.
So yeah. Put it with ice
Another
cream.
put it with ice
Vanilla ice
cream.
cream.
Ooh. Another plant that is on my wish list, I think, is lovage, which he was talking about is he doesn't even use celery anymore. He uses lovage as the replacement for
Tastes
celery and
like slightly
everything.
better celery,
Um,
like celery leaves.
and I think it's probably originally was the opposite. Celery is not that old of a plant. In the U.S., it only started in this area in Portage, Kalamazoo, in like the mid 1800s, late 1800s. It was brought in, well, by two different people. It's arguable, but the Dutch and an Irish guy. But so
Well,
it
they had
wasn't.
the celery root, the European, that had
But
the
they had
big
this
bulb and the stock and
yeah.
the hard stocky
But
fiber
what they brought
stocky.
here was actually the other the stock
Yeah, yeah.
type of plants. The white celery a lot of times as well, the blanched one. But
Cardones is the other thing that looks like celery you can get.
I think that was actually semi-new in Europe
It
too at
was.
that
It was.
time. So it was really a new food that everyone was scared of. But I believe that lovage was used as we use celery routinely. It was lovage that was
Where you
probably the
need that
original.
earthiness and bitterness, and you use a small amount in soups and
Yeah.
stews. Yeah, it serves the same purpose. You just be careful with it because it's like the celery leaves. It's a little on the bitter end, so a little bit goes a long ways.
Yeah.
And but yeah, and you can use the leaves of lavage to. I mean, people do soups and purees, or you put the little tender leaves into your salad blend.
Yeah.
Again, American standard is we like wet, crunchy, green, mild, or to no flavor. Europeans and traditionally through time,
Like
salad was
bitter.
roughage for digestion and exciting your digestive juices. And so you had bitterness and you had juxtaposition of textures and flavors and colors and all the many different flavors of a wild, that would be found in the wild. So
Mhm.
you have to think about salad in a very different way. So
Yeah.
using the celery leaves may not work in a stew because they get bitter, but pinching off those tender ones or those center blanched core ones and garnishing a plate or putting them into a salad is actually very nice.
Yeah. So lovage is a perennial, which basically means you put it in the ground once and you keep getting it, which means you don't really have to keep planting celery if you have some lovage around and you can use that instead. So he was talking about he doesn't even, Mike, the teacher over there, was talking he wasn't even doesn't plant celery at all because he uses
I'm
lovage all
not
the
a
time.
huge. I mean, edible celery is fine. I like it, but I don't eat it a lot or plain. I put it into food, but given the choice, I like the celery root.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot more, a lot of other
Celeriac.
things. Yeah, the celeriac and celery root could be used. So if you have the lovage and then you purposely plant celery root, which grows all year and you really harvest in the fall, that can cover and it has fairly good storage properties. Um, you could kind of cover everything.
Yep. So sounds like you're having a discussion about some good markets in
Yeah, so
Detroit.
I have a
Have some.
feeling I have not been to Eastern Market. I want to
They're
go there
talking about a different
sometime.
one.
Yeah, no, I saw
Honeybee
that.
Market?
But
Yeah.
um, I have a feeling if you tromp through Eastern Market, you might find some quince paste somewhere in all the
There
many
too.
things.
Yeah.
Yep. Um, I used to buy quince paste inexpensively at our local supermarket in New York. We had a large Guatemalan and Ecuadorian and Peruvian. We also had a lot of Dominican in the next town, and so for some reason, the grocery stores, the downtown grocery stores that serve the general population or were kind of Spanish centric, seemed to have it, and it was inexpensive, so I grabbed it all the time. But I used it. I bought it quite a bit more expensively to pair and for fine dining with cheeses and some of the places I worked. But I'm smart about it. I don't buy them from the high end places. I get the same and almost quality and go buy them at the local place for half the money.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I've had problems with
Celery root you
celery.
can find in the grocery. Well, it depends on the grocery store.
Yeah,
You're gonna need one that's produce
driven.
that's produce driven and not the suburban walk by everything clean packaged, tiny little part of loose stuff that's all going bad. Go to the place that has all kinds of produce.
Yeah.
They may not have it year round. It looks like a really hairy, dirty ball the size of your fist or even the size of a softball. It's usually cut on the top because they remove and it's a
The stalk.
whitish, tannish, almost a little bit yellow where they cut it. Sometimes it turns a little green on the edges, slightly green. And yeah, you have to cut all the edges off of it
Yeah.
because they're dirty and sandy.
You'll have to watch us through the season because I do have both celery and celeriac starts in soil blocks right now. They probably won't go in the ground for a little bit because those you want to develop a little further before putting them in the ground. But I do have starts, so as long as they take, we will have celeriac in our garden as well as celery. Now, I've only had luck with celery and celeriac. I think that one year in New York was the
We got a
last
few
time.
pieces,
So I
but
haven't had good luck in our sandy soil here. So we'll see if they
seems like
take.
it should. I don't know.
But it does like more fertile soil.
Yeah.
So if you talk about just east of us in the Portage area,
There's black. We have a
Portage,
black dirt
they have
vegetable area.
basically it was a marshland, and that's where celery grew very well. That's where the Dutch brought it into, and there was a ton of Dutch farms in Portage, Comstock, and even north of
So
Kalamazoo a little bit.
they did garden vegetables for our area, and some
Yeah.
of it even moving in big sent into Chicago.
Yeah.
And
was
you
right
still
on the-
see areas when they plow, around this time or a few weeks ago, it is jet black.
Yeah, that black dirt. So we're not in the black dirt
We
area.
don't have any of that.
We are in the sandy soil, which means eggplant does well, and
Eggplant does great.
so
And the onions do pretty darn good, and the onion and the garlic
the
does
root
great.
vegetables do okay.
Roots do pretty well.
So and
we're aerated. We don't have anything that doesn't like clay and getting soaked, trapped or soaked in water that doesn't drain.
Yeah.
All that stuff does well.
Yeah. So yeah, so I'm starting that list. This class that I did, is going to be the third Saturday of each month. So I'm thinking on the live show after that, I will give you guys kind of a rundown of some of my take homes from it, and just things I've learned from that. And at one point we will have a site walkthrough here, so I'll kind of let you know if that.
And you
changes
said of the
to our
people in the
stuff.
class, we have most property, right?
Yeah.
Which is shocking, but when you do permaculture, you figure out that 5 acres is actually a ton of land. When you do big agriculture, 5 acres is
It's not much.
Your little garden plot.
Yeah. So basically, okay. So as far as the other people in class, there are 2 guys in the class who are both working on community projects. So they weren't doing I don't know if they were doing their own, but their main focus was on a couple community projects in the area. There is one woman who had just doing mainly container stuff and really small garden plots. She's renting, I believe, a trailer or something, or a single wide. There's one woman who has a very small lot that she's doing some gardening, and she really wants to, instead of planting every year, she was talking about really wanting to set it up so things just came back that she liked to eat. So she was focusing on switching it over from annuals to perennials. So it was a variety of people involved. Those who are doing the community projects had been doing permaculture for a while, so they're looking just to get more information on and ideas of how to go about that. We've been kind of taking a lot of permaculture concepts and biointensive concepts and been working with those for a while in New York and Michigan.
Wow, 2.5 hours to find a real grocery store. All right,
boy.
You know what? That means you got to find farmers and farm markets, although you're not going to see celery root till the end of the season.
Yeah.
There'll be somebody growing it. It'll show up at a farm market.
Well, Carrie, you're in. Did you say you were in Texas? Was that who was in Texas?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Aldi, for what they do, can give you some pretty surprising. I hit a couple of stores. We have a place called Myers, which is sort of a local regional.
Noah's Ark knows Myers.
Yep. Oh, that's right.
He's in Michigan.
Yep. So we use. I'll hit Aldi's occasionally. I'll hit Myers occasionally. I hit Costco pretty regularly because they gasoline and they're on my way into town. And then the farmers market every week. Yeah. And we have a downtown grocery store that services an urban area, and so that is also my go-to. What I tell people is, people that have suburban grocery stores, they don't shop, they buy everything pre-made, frozen. They have the worst produce, and it's all overpriced, but it's bad quality and limited selection. I like going into inner city areas because you have families, regardless of wherever they're from, or even if they grew up there. they're more likely at people more likely cooking on a daily or multiple times a week, and they're buying real
A lot of the
provisions.
ethnic food stores will have a lot better produce because
And it's
they
cheap.
incorporate it into their,
Asian grocery store, Spanish grocery
yeah.
store. I don't care. Find what the inner. We have this inner city. Well, it's not inner city, but it's a downtown centric, serving a lot of different communities. And their produce isn't great. They have some other stuff that I get there. They actually have really good meat, which is sometimes hard. Sometimes with the place that has a good produce, you don't touch the meat or the fish. This place produce is okay, but they have and so I shop sort of the opposite and avoid the big grocery stores. Now, if I want fat-free yogurt, although we've kind of figured out fat-free yogurt's worthless, and get at least some fat in the yogurt and
Yeah,
things like that, because we're not really chicken breasts and fat-free yogurt and such anymore. We have limited uses for
yeah.
those things.
We
Um,
like the darker meat.
so I go dry. Well, we have our own chicken, so
Yeah, that's true.
through the course of my week and my month, I find wherever we're living where to catch the right stores to get certain things, and so you selectively buy your
Yeah,
groceries. But it is hard when you're more
yeah.
rural. It gets really hard. There are things here in Michigan now that I regularly could get in New York, and I
You
just
can't get
can't
any.
get them. It's not
Um,
going to happen.
and it's hard also because well, it depends on your area, and I don't know the growing conditions and what grows best in Texas. I'm guessing a lot warmer than here, and drier, I want to say. So you got to find what grows well in those conditions. Like I'm pretty sure the sea kale would probably, well, it is
It's
northern.
cool. I
It
don't
is a
know if
cool
it would.
climate, but it likes the really sandy, drier climate too, so it might do okay there.
Well, you can always look to Italy, um,
Yeah.
because Italy has cool or wet mountainy areas in the north, and it gets extremely hot and dry in the
The
south and
south.
into Sicily, and then you have the islands in Sardinia, and they're famous for taking what the land gives you, and sometimes really rough conditions of produce, and making amazingly good food out of it. So, also, if you're having a challenge figuring out what grows here, go look to regions around the world,
Yeah.
and then drive your growing and you're eating based on those climates.
Yeah, and there is growing indoors and
Yeah,
hydroponic.
we're running real late. I know some people are
Yeah.
heading out, which is fine.
Yeah.
So
So, yeah, good night, you guys. And we got to wrap up here too because I'm getting close to my bedtime. But make a hoop
yeah, we
house
do the
works for me.
hoops now. You can burn stuff out badly because they
Yeah.
can raise
Well, you
in
could do shade cloth.
yeah, you
A
can
hoop shade
rise
cloth.
the temperature can rise 30 to 40
Yeah.
degrees, but in the summer you can use shade cloth to knock down. It won't hold the moisture so much, but it will knock down the
The heat.
intensity of heat that will
Yeah.
burn out things.
Yeah. So you can get more greens and some of the cooler weather crops if you have shade cloths in the south. But I'm guessing you can grow some that are cooler, our summer crops you could probably grow in the winter.
Yeah, well, that's what they do in Italy. In hot areas, your classic vegetable crops get grown in the rainy season and in the winter because
Yeah.
there's no way during the dry, hot time. But also, some things, if you can irrigate, the more
Hi,
you can
princess.
grow, you can do really well,
Yeah.
even with high heat and high sun, as long as you just keep
Yeah.
it wet.
And oh, there's another person I may have missed. What is that? Olivian Acres?
Hmm.
Oh, I'm not sure if I said that right. Yeah, you came in up there. So yeah, we are just wrapping up. I think I've gone through most of what I wanted to hit on. You could check out the blog. I did kind of post some of the pictures there as well. With some explanations, and I included some books, some of the recommended books that they had, and there's links to Amazon for those books. Um, there's Gaia's Garden by Toby Hemingway, which we already have, which I do recommend about. And there's a number of others which I haven't looked at yet, but were recommended at this class. So you can check those things out if you're interested. On the web page is listed down below, and you just look at today's blog. So that was just put on there. There should be links also on the our Facebook group and page. So if you have trouble getting to that, um,
Let us
anyway,
know what you guys are all doing for Memorial Day. We do plan to have a live show for
yes,
Memorial Day weekend next week.
we will do a live show
Um,
next week.
but yeah, and we're hanging around here and just doing some
Yeah.
planting and catching up on stuff, and I've got a new market that we're starting, so I've got 2 markets on Saturday, and then the following week I think I start doing another market during the week. So we're trying to.
Yeah.
So we're not doing anything particularly special, and some of the neighbors might be having parties, but everybody has parties and
We just got to
bonfires.
get plants in the ground.
But yeah, we're really are.
Yeah.
We need plants in the ground.
We have some in the ground. Actually, we could harvest greens. We have a ton of greens.
We have a few greens.
Our greens are finishing from our winter bed, our hoop bed. But I also planted new greens like red romaine and a whole variety of things. Some spinach, some shards. My
I
shard's
bought
not
greens
doing
at the market yesterday, but it's probably the last bag of greens
that you'll need to buy.
that we buy for a while. So.
Yeah, we probably won't need any unless we just want some of Nobby's wild.
Well, if we do the wild blend, which means if we haven't had time to pick and forage, or she gets things that we don't know or can access, those are so intense. That's that idea of really differentiated flavors and textures from wild forage, and so it's almost too intense. I know somebody uses them for smoothies, but it seems like that's overkill and expensive. But I like to blend them with other greens because they are good, and I love garnishing plates or specialty items or meat or something with them. And just place some microgreens and baby greens.
But or just take them and put them on your sandwich.
I've done that. I put them, wash them down, get the sand off, and put them right on. A sandwich is actually very good. Like I rarely buy roast beef, but if we have a roast beef or even deli, cold cuts, ham, something that's a little heartier than say turkey. It's pretty tasty on sandwich.
Yeah.
And we make most of our sandwich bread.
Yes, we do. So, and I will keep posting update pictures through Instagram, so you can check that out as well. I have a few garden pictures that have gone up. So, but we should do a garden update soon. We should be doing a flock update soon because just had 2 girls go broody this weekend. Actually, one I'm questioning, so we'll see if she sticks with it. But the other one's definitely broody, and their chicks are going to end up being meat chicks. We're going to have a big butcher day. If I gave them like 15 eggs each, no, I doubt I'll get 100% hatch rate. But
yeah,
it's
so
possible.
That might give us most of our chicken
meat for the winter,
for the fall into the winter, which would be good. We're trying to produce. Well, the one problem now is we have some chickens we've let go longer because they were underweight, and through the winter. We have a lot of tougher chickens, so braising chickens is great. It's actually tastier, but we don't have much in the freezer that you can grill or roast. So we're trying to get some that we're going to speed them up and slow down their running around, fatten them up a little bit, and we're going to take them earlier just so we get some more tender items.
Yeah, they don't have to be very big.
Although I think having braising chickens in general is fine for most things. We just moderate how we use them.
Yeah, so we're gonna go for that and probably have a butcher day on the earlier end of things. But if we set them tonight, that could mean we have up to 30 chicks around. Technically, you could have more if we have twins in there, but up to 30 chicks or so at most. That's a big butcher day. I think the most we've done is about
15-ish.
12 to 15 range.
Well, we do know that set up and takedown, you're at around a half day with that number.
Yeah.
So
we hand pluck.
Yeah, you don't add extra time for setup and takedown. You just add extra time for in the middle. So it's probably a good portion of a day. Yeah. If we have to do that many, or maybe we can recruit a friend and
we might be able to
get them a couple of chickens in the process. Get them 2 or 3 chickens. Yeah. We might have to work on our plucking devices a little bit.
Yeah, that might be something we might have to invest in if we have a big butcher day.
Well, there's so many scenarios of people making different things.
Yeah.
Because the pluckers are $500 to $1,000, and I don't think we're going to spend $500 to $1,000 to be able to pluck our chickens a few times a year in the small amount. So.
Anyway, we hand pluck. I know a lot of people actually do purchase those machines or make their own.
Yeah, I mean, we might be able to make a small one or something, but yeah, it's not worth that much money. We are not doing a weekly, so
yeah. So
we have we have people that do rabbits. Rabbits are a lot easier because you just skin them, and so that step is very. Well, the gutting is very fast, but
You don't have to pluck them.
yeah, you skin them. Now you have to scrape or get around the limbs, so that takes a little bit of finesse. But generally, it is faster and easier to clean a rabbit than a
Yeah.
chicken.
And they
Of course, you
grow.
can rip the skin off. That's the other option on chickens.
You could take the skin
You
off.
can rip the skin off, and then you can do it very easily. But the skin has so much gelatin, so a lot of your stock properties
Come from
are in
that.
the skin, and because our pastured chickens have very little fat under them, you're really getting you're not adding fat, you're adding collagen and protein and quality. Even if you aren't eating it, you get it boiled into your
Stock.
stock.
Yeah. So yeah, we got to really wrap up here because
Yeah, skin them, feathers and all. Yeah, that's an option. That's an Asian method where you can. I had an instructor who could in culinary school. She could butcher a chicken in like what was it, 30 seconds or something, and she could do them. Oh yeah, so there's videos of it. It's insane. Um, and then she could take from live in like a minute or. But that, of course, required that you remove you tore the skin off and
yeah,
not defeathered it.
yeah. Anyway, we will be here next week. Yeah, keeps the moisture and
Yeah,
keeping
yeah.
the
The
skin
skin
on.
keeps the moisture in, and it bathes it in a little bit of the fat and the collagen. So generally, cooking with the skin on, whether you eat it or not, has some preferences. Although when you have a really good, when we slow our chickens down,
Yeah.
they're moist and juicy anyways. It's the quickly grown ones that tend to dry out. But yeah, we have a preference to work with the skin and then remove it as needed.
So anyway, we will be here next week. I'm gonna see if I have time to do herb of the week, but I'm not sure if I do. Otherwise, we will give you updates on what's going on in our garden because that's been our primary focus and needs to stay our primary focus until we get our entire annual garden planted. And then we'll just see where things go. I'll keep working on videos and try to get a couple more out this week. I have a morel one that we did. Of course, it's getting to the end of morel season even here, but we can get that up.
Yeah, we got morels. You got
I got the farm one.
that specialty farm, which is kind of hanging in there, waiting. That'll be a treat.
Yeah, so that'll take me more time. I might have to take a few days to work on that one. Already started.
You already have Chinatown up, right?
No, I need to get Chinatown up. I'll probably do that first because that'll be a quicker edit. The farm one is going to be put on the back burner until I have a few days to really concentrate on it, which might mean next weekend. But we'll get Morel one, Chinatown in Montreal, and I'll have to see if I have other footage. It would be from a couple weeks ago. So anyway, you guys have a good week. We will be here at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time next week as well. So I hope to see you guys then. Have a good night. And
Gus has been making a lot of noise today.
Actually, Lucky was making a lot of noise too. But the whole flocks were making a lot of noise. But Gus has been guarding a silkie who has chicks who's not in his area. He hisses at me every time I go over to her because I think she's his girlfriend. But anyway, that's another story. I'll have to give you a flock update on that one. So I will see you guys next week. Take care.
Good night.
Good night. And sorry, take me a moment to hit stop. Good night.